At night, when the last train has left, it's the responsibility of the station staff to ensure that these are switched off and the silent hours of the night begin. Barry Oakley was a station supervisor working the overnight shift at Hyde Park Corner in November 1978. As usual, he'd closed and emptied the station and had shut the escalator down. Having checked that he'd properly removed the breakers, a piece of equipment that stops the escalator from moving, he and his colleague then returned to the supervisor's office.
Now, all the escalators were off and everything was quiet. At about 2:30, 25 to 3, there was a commotion outside in the booking hall area, the concourse area. When going out into the booking hall area, we noticed that the escalator that we'd come up on was on, which I found rather strange because, to my knowledge, once the breaker was out, there's no current to that escalator. To start an escalator up, you need to physically use a key. And around about, it must have been about 3:20 by the time we got back and all this had gone on. And while I was making this tour, I had this terrible sensation in the back of the neck that something was watching me or something was, there that I couldn't describe. And the room was really cold by now. It was just like, you could see your breath through the coldness. And I turned around, and when I turned around, I noticed my colleague was like up against the side of the table, against the wall. He'd gone white, like an off colour. I wondered if he was taken ill, if something had happened. So I immediately gone to him, trying to bring him round. It took me about 5 or 10 minutes to actually get him to come round and talk to me. He said, "Did you see the face?" He reckoned someone's head had come through there and looked at the pair of us. Not long after that, he then decided he was going home, he wasn't going to stay.
Tariq Rana was a station supervisor working at Beacon Tree Station, a quiet commuter overground station on the District Line in East London. He was working a late shift one evening in the summer of 1992. He was about to go home and was finishing off some paperwork.
In the office at Beacon Tree Station, we had a door that led onto the National Railways platform. While I was doing my work, I heard that door rattle. I thought nothing of it at the time because the trains normally pass on that side. After a couple of minutes, I heard the door rattle again. So I thought, well, I heard it rattle the first time, so there must be a train coming. And then after another couple of minutes, I heard it rattle again. And then I thought to myself, well, it's now rattled 3 times. The train, if there was one, should be coming. I got very uncomfortable with that, so I had another member of staff upstairs, so I thought I'll go upstairs and I'll chat with him. I walked on the platform, got to the staircase, but I just had this strong feeling that there was somebody walking behind me. And then basically at that point I turned round and I saw an image of a woman. She had long blonde hair, probably about halfway down to her back. And she had no face. It was just like a blank where the features would be. And the funny thing is, every time I tell this story, I always get goose pimples, and I've really got them now as well because I know that I did see this image of a woman. Anyway, by that time, I've approached my member of staff, and I remember his exact words. He said to me, "You look as if you've seen a ghost," and I said to him, I think I have." And then he says to me, "Oh, is it a woman in a white dress?" I said, "Yeah, how do you know?" And he goes, "Oh, I've seen her as well."
From Beacon Tree Station, if you travel westbound along the Green District Line, you'll eventually arrive at Embankment Station in central London near Trafalgar Square and Fleet Street. Embankment is one of London's busiest interchange stations. Over the years, many of the station staff and contractors have reported very strange feelings and unusual experiences in one of the station's disused tunnels which runs under the Thames. The tunnel is called Page's Walk.
Strange noises. Some have said they've heard footsteps. Others that the lights have gone out and then come back on again.
You hear the doors slamming, stuff like that, and then when you walk through the tunnel, you get to a point there's changing temperature.
It does get quite cold down there, and it does give a very eerie sort of sense of a feeling down there.
You're not going to get me to go down with you.
One person who has no choice about going down to Page's Walk is a contractor we met while we were filming. He didn't want to be named, but he's been coming to work in the tunnel every day for the past 3 months. And the tunnel, rather than the work, is beginning to have an effect on him.
I've worked all over London, places that got bombed during the Second World War. They never thought about anything like spirit, so I don't worry about it, just get on with your job. But Page's Walk, this one is different from day one. I felt like I wasn't wanted or I was somewhere where I shouldn't be. Some of the staff, I think, do believe there's something down here. Yes, I've thought about what it can be. I've thought of answers, what can make the doors bang. I don't know. I'm not saying there's something down there. I'm not saying there is or there isn't. I don't know. I don't want that job.
Down the bottom.
We took Vic to Page's Walk to see if he could measure any infrasound and whether it would offer any explanation to the number of strange experiences.
Well, the whole atmosphere of this place is incredible. There's a huge gale blowing through. The door's just closed in front of me. So, you know, the whole place has an absolutely incredible atmosphere. You get these cold blasts of air. I don't know whether that's the trains moving through the tunnel, but yeah, the temperature changes. You can actually feel, you know, the clothes moving, and I love the noise that the door makes. It's going to bang again. Well, we're about halfway into the tunnel, and the spectrum analyzer is reading quite a lot of low-frequency sound. You can see that the marks down this end are quite high. It's feeling a lot colder. The whole atmosphere now is chilled. I mean, I'm not suggesting that that's abnormal, it's just changed. The start, right down in the next to the station, the temperature was about 24, so we're a good 10 degrees lower up here than we were down there. I mean, that's pretty weird because you would expect it to get warmer, but nonetheless, I think the draft is actually blowing the air up here. The piece of tape is starting to move up the tunnel, and there's quite a draft. You can actually feel the draft moving, and that coincides with the door actually being in the closed position. So the draft's now dropped, and my guess is that in a minute, when a train going in the other direction comes, it will suck the air back out again. There we go. So that's now sucking the air in the other direction, which could move the door the other way. I think this is actually a classic example of the kinds of effects that infrasound can have. You kind of feel this weird sort of presence almost.
Clear that the high levels of infrasound on the tube are responsible for some of the strange experiences. However, some experiences are not as easily explained. Without knowing, in 1983, a woman living on the outskirts of London had taken a photo on the underground that was to baffle the science world and involve her in one of the world's most famous murder trials.
I can't understand how that image has been arrived at.
It's all too inexplicable.
The tunnels, stations and trains of the London Underground are home to unexplainable experiences each year, usually reported by the staff who work in shifts to man every station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. However, sometimes it's members of the public who find themselves witnesses to unexplainable events. Millions of photos are taken of the underground each year, most ending up in a holiday album somewhere. But the occasional photo ends up in the hands of someone altogether more unusual. One such photo, taken on the Bakerloo line in 1983, was sent to Maurice Gross from the Society for Psychical Research. Over the years, Maurice has examined and unravelled hundreds of unexplainable photos.
When I first saw the photograph, I was astonished. There's no other word for it. I just couldn't make it out.
The photo that Maurice had examined was a picture taken in a carriage on the Bakerloo line by Karen Collette, who was showing her family around London.
My nephew wanted me to take a picture of the underground, to have the brown framework, of the train. So I proceeded to take the picture and didn't think anything else of it till some months later when I had the pictures developed. I handed the pictures to my father and my sister's boyfriend at the time, and they were looking through the pictures and they looked at me and said, "Oh, that's not very nice." And I said, "Well, what isn't?" And they said, "That picture that you took."
Karen couldn't believe her eyes. She'd taken a picture that science would struggle to explain.
It doesn't make any sense at all. Here we have a photograph of a man sitting in an electric chair, of all things, squared up in the underground. Nobody obviously saw it, and yet the camera did. Now, what was the reason for that?
Robert Cox is from the National Museum of Photography. He's an expert in analysing negatives and images, and would be able to tell whether Karen's photo was genuine or not.
The point with this is that it's an amateur camera. So to do manipulation of photographs, particularly in the 80s, you'd have needed quite sophisticated cameras, quite expensive cameras that would focus closely and be able to control the exposure accurately. These negatives are from the 110 camera, an amateur point-and-shoot camera, with not the range of facilities to do manipulation. I don't think the photograph has been manipulated.
After researching it, I found out that it was Bruno Hauptmann, who actually, there's a waxwork of him sitting in the electric chair in the Chamber of Horrors in Madame Tussauds. And I found that he was the so-called kidnapper and murderer of the Limburg child, the aviator in the 1930s.
So then the next thing I did was I actually went down to Madame Tussauds. I walked in there, I looked at the man that was sitting in the chair, who happened to be Bruno Hauptmann, and what was shocking to me was that my picture was absolutely identical in buttons, in the straps, the way the hands were gripped onto the chair. And the only thing that was different with mine was that to indicate he's been electrocuted, there was blue sparks coming out of both fingers.
I think it's a poster, either outside or in the carriage behind, probably of something that was happening in a show in London.
A friend of mine whose mum had passed away asked me to go along to see a medium, and I sat outside while she went in and spoke to the medium. As she was about to leave, the medium came outside and said, "I have a message for you." And I looked at him and said, "But I'm not here for a reading." And he said, "It's about your photo." And he said, "Just want you to know is that the man said, I'm accused of something that I didn't do, but I did something else." And that was the end of the message.